good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are coming to us from. Welcome back to another episode of the Nonprofit Show. I got to say, you should have been with us in the green room because we were just having a great conversation before anything ever happened with the Nonprofit Show, right, Paul?
That's right.
Well, we're really excited to have this conversation. It's a little different, a little edgy, but something that is really starting to pop up, in the last several months, talking about the hidden costs of playing it safe when you're with your nonprofit. And what does the post-pandemic risk intolerance look like now with where we are? Paul J. Hanscom is with us, Chief Growth Officer at Ewald Consulting. Paul, this is just going to be, I think, one of those conversations that lights a fire under a lot of us. And so I'm really excited to have you on here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation, Julia.
It's going to be a lot of fun. We have great conversations each and every day, and I want to make sure that everyone understands our presenting sponsors, they do not exert any control over what we talk about, which is really an incredible thing. And they support us no matter what we talk about, who we talk with, and it's just amazing. And our partners, I'm proud to say, are Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, Fundraisers Friday, and our newest member of our partnership team is holdingsforgood.com. They are a bank for nonprofits. So we are super excited to welcome them. And you'll be learning and hearing from them shortly. I'm Julia C. Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. More importantly, Paul J. Hanscom, CAE, Chief Growth Officer with Ewald Consulting. You can find them at ewald.com. Okay, first off, what's a CAE?
A Certified Association Executive.
Okay, awesome. And what does that mean?
That means there are various domains of association management, a division of nonprofit management around governance, conference planning, government affairs, and so on. And so the CAE program put on by the American Society of Association Executives has different content on each of these different domains. And then there's an exam that you need to sit for and qualified by a number of years of experience in association management. And it's got a difficult pass rate, but I passed the exam in 2008 and have maintained my credentials since.
Good for you. I think that the association concept is one of those secret parts of being successful in a nonprofit organization. If you can align yourself and your mission to an association, I feel like that advocacy and training and knowledge pulls you so much further than if you had to do it by yourself. And I think a lot of nonprofits don't realize that. They think that they're all in their own world in their little community, and they forget to, or they don't even recognize that there's this outside association that can help them. And wow, I see it. I see a tremendous difference with those nonprofits, no matter the size, Paul.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's helpful to have an organization that is led by volunteer leaders that have been practitioners in the space for so long that help put together that curriculum and put language to the work that we're doing every day. So that was what was really enlightening for me was, irrespective of how you sit for the exam and pass and so on, reading through the curriculum and the materials and be like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And I see how these different things play together. So it was a very worthwhile experience for me. A plug for the ASAE
Yeah, they're a great organization, and I've spoken at their events before, and it is astonishing how varied the associations are that belong to them. I mean, just like amazing, but yet they're all kind of rowing in the same direction, using the same tools. So really, really interesting and super, super cool. Well, okay, so now we got to get into the meat and potatoes here because I am so interested in your view about leadership. And let's frame it up. The pandemic leadership, what was going on then, and then what are you seeing now?
Yeah, absolutely. So my day job here, Ewald Consulting. So a little bit about the company, if I may.
Yes.
We work with a variety of different organizations, all largely member-based organizations, associations. And so I'm in conversations regularly with boards of directors, executive directors, CEOs, and we're talking about the long-range growth plans, since I'm a chief growth officer, for these organizations and what's their vision of what's the value they hope to contribute to society, to their member community. And so those conversations have evolved over the 20 years I've been involved, but especially from pre-pandemic to, oh my gosh, pandemic, what do we do? To then evolving from, we're taking it month by month during the pandemic to we're looking 6 months out, we're looking out a year now, and now looking out 3, 5, and even 10 years for a vision of what impact they want to have. But the nature of those conversations has been evolving in that period as well, and in a way that I have some concerns around. And that's when you and I started talking about this and this risk tolerance or risk intolerance. Because pre-pandemic, there would be these conditions of risk intolerance and more conservative decision making around innovation and piloting new ideas and entrusting staff to run with the ball in certain things versus having a real tight control from the top down approach. And then during the pandemic, everyone was welcome to the table to vet their ideas and bring ideas on ways that the organization can thrive, create value, a lot of listening to the community and asking how can we be of service and leverage what we've built. And some of these organizations have been around for over 100 years. How can we leverage what we've built here as a community in this organization to help you to thrive and survive through this pandemic? So it felt like a really, in hindsight, a really healthy evolution of the relationship between the individual stakeholders in the community, the different stakeholder factions and groups, and the organization's governance. And I'm seeing, throughout my conversations with various groups, these little hints of reversion back to the way it used to be, and less interest in bringing everybody to the table, less of an appetite to make decisions, be decisive, and move forward, and more of an inclination to, well, that doesn't sound perfect yet. We haven't collected enough data on that yet. Let's send that back to the committee to mull over and come back in a month or two, or next time we have a board meeting next quarter with a more clear recommendation, when your gut tells you with enough data and enough input that we're ready to make a decision and move forward with this in a controlled and thoughtful manner. We're not throwing it to the wind and throwing out intolerable risk or uninformed risk, but taking some smart experimentation forward allows for that level of innovation that's healthy for an organization to evolve and healthy for your stakeholders and funders to see that the organization is engaging in. Otherwise, they're going to think, boy, they really went back to, they were really vibrant coming out of the pandemic and really engaged me for my feedback. And I saw how we were creating together. And now it feels like they're going back to doing their own thing the way they always used to. And I think people came out of the pandemic enlightened about what the potential was and what an organization could be, and seeing how we're leveraging technology and engagement and all this creative thinking to be more and create more. And people don't want to go back. Now that you've opened up their eyes and we've opened up the opportunities to them, they don't want to go back to the way things used to always be, with the doors shut and decisions being made without communicating outwardly about the rationale behind them, how progress is going forward, and what role you can have in manifesting that better reality for our greater good of the community.
So let me ask you this, because I'm kind of interested and we were talking about this in the green room, and to me, it's just a fascinating conversation and observation you have. And right off the bat, I'm thinking, like, is it because we're fearful of yet another change, or are we just exhausted and it's easier to go back to what we were doing? I mean, because we're changing leadership now because of the demographic shifts, which we all understand and we talk about it.
Mhm.
But what do you think is the root of this? I don't know if we'll ever know, this close to being in the action. This might be a question that gets answered, in 10 years. But
Yeah.
what do you see are some of these sources of this?
Both of the things that you suggested, I think, are spot on. With some organizations, it's that fear of making the wrong step now. Now that we've survived the pandemic, we've made it through that. We made it through the Great Resignation too, and a lot of
Yep.
organizations had to rethink, how are we staffing this organization? How are we drawing on volunteers? What's the right balance there? If we need to reduce the quantity that we're doing now and really laser in on the core value we create in the community. Now that the pressure is off a little bit, where do we evolve? Where do we experiment? We could go back to some of those areas that were, nice ideas in 2019. Do we revisit those? Has the world shifted and now there's new ideas out there we should consider? And so there's a little bit of analysis paralysis and fear on
Yeah.
one end. And the other is, like you're saying, there's decision fatigue, especially at that executive director CEO level, where the board has leaned heavily on that individual to bring solutions to the table that they can serve more as subject matter experts and almost like a focus group of different segments of the community that the organization is trying to serve, and not in the manner that they used to, and where staff is looking to that executive from their perspective and looking for guidance and leadership and decision making. So the executive director or CEO is really caught in the middle, giving guidance both directions, and there is definitely real decision making fatigue in that role, and we've seen that if you are plugged into some of these recruiting channels and HR. The turnover rates for executive directors have never been higher than they are now, because people are burnt out in that role, in that capacity, with those expectations of them. And frankly, I don't see that changing anytime in the near future because of evolving demands. And it feels like once we get through one thing, it's the next. Like I said, that the pandemic, then the Great Resignation, then the advent of artificial intelligence and large language models, and whatever happens next, and regulation, deregulation, policy level impacts, funding at the federal, state, and local levels. All these things, it just feels like there's always that next punch coming. As soon as you thought you got to the top, you
Well,
get down again. So that is a real concern as well.
I think it is a concern, and I want to move into this notion of culture, because I feel like if you talk to older people they'll say, "Well, I've been through the wars." It's always something. It's always something. I mean, we're not, selling spa services in this sector. We're dealing with hard issues, and we're trying to solve problems. And so for some weird reason, that seems to shock us when we have another challenge, right?
Right.
And so what do you advise us when we look at risk taking culture? Because I don't think people can even define that they're in this. Like, I don't know what you see, but do you see leaders saying, I hear leaders saying all the time, "Oh, Julia, I'm in a funk. I'm exhausted."
Yeah.
They don't really understand where that originated, or they can't articulate it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
how do we look at a cultural issue that we can share across our community to help us understand what's going on?
And a couple of things. One is realizing you're not alone in that sentiment. That this isn't something that you're experiencing personally. That this is something that's being experienced more broadly. And so, living in the question, living in that ambiguity of not having the right answer, like you're saying, the kind of shocks to the macro level system seem to be more frequent now than they used to be. Made it through the 80s and then the early 90s. And then there was Y2K. But then there was September 11th was a huge shock to many of us. Then there were a number of years, and then we had the Great Recession, and then we had nearly a decade pandemic, and then 2 years Great Resignation, and then not even 2 years AI, and then the next year, all the policy changes. So it feels like there's been this consolidation or this acceleration of macro level changes that we're all being the demand is there for us to adapt and evolve and respond to those things. I think the acceleration is something that people haven't all been able to adapt to. And some of
Yeah.
that can come down to having the right structures around it as well. I know we'll get into that in a bit as well, about having frameworks and lenses through which you view some of these changes and being able to respond and be nimble to that. So I think having the right mindset going into some of these changes will allow you to have confidence in, at the individual level and at the organizational level, that we've been through things, we didn't die, so
Right.
we can do things in the future and still survive and thrive from that.
Paul, it's interesting that you said that, because I'm thinking now, it's really a fascinating lens that you just gave us to think about where we were in these decades up to this point, and that time that we had to kind of recalibrate, define, move through. And then you're just like, hello, things have sped up. And so, what a great message to a team for you to say, look, if you're feeling overwhelmed or you're feeling, like you're exhausted or burnt out, maybe this is why. It's kind of like you've given us permission to say, whew, yeah, that's a lot.
Right. Yeah. And any given day, you feel like you're in your bubble and you're not out there necessarily. I'm lucky enough to be able to lift my head up from the desk and see, because I'm talking to these different boards of directors and these different CEOs, and I'm hearing some of these commonalities among them of like, yeah, it's right. Back in the day, it was like you get a hit and then you lean back and then you hit again. And now it's like just hit, hit, hit. It's like, when is the lean back period? It's not okay. We're gonna have to keep rolling with the punches then. And
Right.
some groups are doing a really good job of that too. So I don't mean to be doom and gloom. I'm seeing some organizations that have some of these tools in place, some of these frameworks, the mindset among the staff team and the leaders. They're like, okay, we anticipate the next thing is going to come. We don't know what that is, but we're going to be ready to make decisions. I think Eisenhower says strategic plans are worthless. Strategic planning is priceless. And the planning process creates that team, the decision-making frameworks, and the capacity and culture to be able to weather those unpredictable shifts that we're inevitably going to have thrust upon us. And we got to be able to deal with them.
Yeah. And, I think that you said some things that are really interesting, and that is about understanding mindset, and that you're not siloed in your stress or your grief, or, all the issues that come about. And I appreciate you highlighting that, because I think a lot of us go home and I'm holding my hand up, plop down in the chair and say, oh my God, I'm exhausted. I'm stressed out. I'm, blah, blah, blah. And I know my husband is like, sometimes just like, wow, what are you doing here? Right. And it's not an easy thing. So I want to kind of chat a little bit more about that, and talk to you about how we can be more responsive to change, and we can be more nimble, um, and without just giving up, right? Without just burning out and moving on, which is, I think, always the big fear for the nonprofit sector,
Mm-hmm.
is that we're bleeding people off. So how do you see that we can arm ourselves with this concept?
Having a risk-aware culture, I think, is something that takes time and something you have to
Yeah.
cultivate. But not being blind to the risks or ignore the risks, but saying, there are risks associated with us doing these things. Let's weigh those risks and determine, can we mitigate some of the risk? Is there a way that we can gauge the level of risk we're taking on as an organization versus what we think the opportunity is here too,
Yeah.
and be able to take a chance on a small a pilot test scale, have some sort of metric there to measure, is it working, is it not working, how long are we going to allow this to play out and see if it's going to fail fast, or are we going to give it a little longer? Especially, you think marketing has longer, time horizon, 12 to 18 months on some of these marketing initiatives. So having a way to cultivate that kind of risk-aware culture is one thing. I think the risk posed by inaction, and I was just talking to a board of directors about this too, because they had a big change they wanted to make, or they were considering, because they were seeing by the metrics that a long-held initiative was slowly performing worse and worse every single year. And they had come up with a solution that was going to be what they thought was high risk because they'd never done it before. But it took a really long time to finally get off the burning platform and choose that, because as well they saw this performing worse and worse every year. It wasn't getting a grade F. It was getting like a grade C at this point.
It was the slow burn.
Yeah, the slow burn. And then they knew that they had high confidence that this solution was going to be getting a grade A. So to go from the C to the A, they were afraid they were going to get the F grade. And so it took a long time to have that conversation. Today versus, like I say, a few years ago, they just said okay, yeah, we absolutely see how this is. It's been this slow burn, and now it's 2020, and all the things that were slow burn are burnt.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, let's move.
So let's talk about that, because now we have the opportunity for those of us that were involved in, to your point, board management or oversight or governance during the pandemic, or even staff and leadership. Mm-hmm. And now we're in this new, I love to hear you keep punching. We're in these new dilemmas with, and it's not just one, it's a lot. Some are intertwined, some are not. How do we navigate a modern approach? Because I've got to ask you this question. I don't know if boards or C-suite understand that they're in this period of malaise. Mm-hmm. I mean, so do we call it out? Do we say, hey, look, everybody, you're all dealing with burnout and you're dealing with fear. Let's get beyond that. I mean, how do you lean in so that you're not like punishing somebody or making them feel even worse, but encouraging them to be like, oh yeah, I have been fearful, or oh yeah, I want to take risks. Like, how do we get to that point?
I mean, it can be taking the positive angle on it is look back, and we all have short memories, but look back a few years and the successes we had when we were shortening decision-making timelines, taking calculated risks, and moving in a matter of weeks when it used to be months to make things happen. And look at the results we were able to get. Remember when we were living in that time and had that type of cultural shift in rapid order. Remember back to that and try to channel that into today. Is there something specific we can get our hands around that is holding us back from having that culture sustainably? Or is it a choice we can make and say, we're going to continue to be nimble, continue to listen to our stakeholders and ask of them and hold these, ask me anything sessions, Zoom calls on a regular basis, or send out a survey on an annual basis versus, an unpredictable and irregular cadence. That listening component is one, and then communicating back what you've heard. Those vital communication elements are really valued by stakeholders, to feel heard, to feel involved, and to see the communication about what the organization has decided to do going forward, how that tethers back to what they heard from the community, and the organization serves as that vibrant, relevant forum for the community to come together. I mean, that's what really separates the value of an organization from what we're seeing as what people claim as threats of AI and AI-generated content. AI isn't a forum bringing people together in a sense that is real and authentic, in a way that nonprofit organizations are so perfectly postured to do. I'm pretty bullish about the future for associations in particular, of course, but nonprofits in general, because there is this element of community, this element of belonging and identity that when we come together as this organization, there's nothing quite like it elsewhere. And the more that organizations can communicate and lean into that unique opportunity that they offer, I think the more their value will resonate with any stakeholder groups.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that there's a desperate need for belonging, and whatever that belonging looks like, there's a spiritual component, not in a religious sense, but like being with your tribe, however we want to phrase it, but
Right.
being a part of something that you believe is important, whatever that is. And I agree with you. I think that's the secret sauce for a lot of nonprofits. If they can say, this is an important mission and we want you to help be a part of this journey, I think that's where you garner support in a lot of different ways, not just financial, but the champions that you can build. And I think that's really, really important. We were talking in the green room, and I just am fascinated with this concept of the short view and the lack of memory when it comes to trauma and difficult times. And the astonishment that CEO leaders have been saying, it's just like the pandemic now. I mean, and that they're literally befuddled and kind of like amazed.
Yeah.
Isn't that fascinating to you?
Yeah, I wouldn't think I'd be surprised by that, but
Yeah.
hopefully, like I said, we can lean on the skills that we developed, those muscles that we built during the pandemic, and reinvigorate that and continue to use those tools, and hopefully the strength and culture that we've got as an organization to help navigate us through this challenge and future challenges that we just have to anticipate. I relatively recently saw a video of an interview with Jeff Bezos, who was saying, I'm always bored by the question of, what do you see changing in the future? Because the list is endless. Everything's changing in the future. More interesting is the question of what will remain the same in the future, because that list is pretty short. Through his lens, it was, people want things faster and cheaper. That's obviously that's for-profit talk. In nonprofit association speak, the one thing that I think will remain consistent for the next decade, if we meet again 10 years from now and we're having this conversation, I think they'll still say that sense of identity and community, like you're saying, the spirit of this group, the reason why we exist in our mission, those things will remain the same.
Yeah.
You can have technology shifts and staffing changes, and there's healthy volunteer board turnover over time, and regulations are going to change, and policies and so on and so forth. We'll adapt and twist and turn with those as needed. But that need for community and that identification with what the organization has stated as its mission and who we are, the clearer we can communicate that out to the world, I think the more that will resonate with people who are seeking authenticity and legitimacy in communication, and a place where they can connect.
I love it. Well, I think you just boiled it down. And I think that we don't need to wait 10 years to get you back on the nonprofit show, because you're speaking my linguity, as they say. I mean, you're absolutely, I think, spot on. And it has been so great to have you join us. Paul J. Hanscom, CAE, Chief Growth Officer at Ewald Consulting. You can learn more about this really interesting part of the nonprofit sector at ewald.com, Ewald Consulting, and you'll see kind of how they manage their business and what they're talking about. Really clever way to introduce your team, with family photos and things that really speak to the personality of each one of your team members. I really like that part of your website. So thank you so much. What a great conversation. And I think that so much of what you said today, Paul, is something that we kind of know at the core, but we forget it. And it doesn't bubble up until we have some sort of like drama, which is dreadful. And that's not the way to work. But it's kind of the human condition, I think, sometimes. And so this was a great reminder of how we can lead our organizations. We lead here on the Nonprofit Show because we have amazing presenting sponsors, and they include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, Fundraisers Friday, and our newest member of our support group, holdingsforgood.com, a nonprofit banking system, which we are super excited to join into the fold. So, Paul, I'm going to take some more risks today. I'm going to have a more open spirit, and thank you for bringing that to the table.
Yep, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's been a lot of fun. Hey, everybody, as we end each and every episode of the Nonprofit Show, we leave with this message, and it goes like this: to stay well so you can do well. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you again.